Okay, so today we're going to be talking about 5 classic movies that we really love. To set the parameters, we said that they have to be made prior to 1993. We gave ourselves a 30-year stopgap, and they have to be rated at least a 7 out of 10 or higher on IMDb. Also, we will not be featuring any horror classics on these lists. So every other genre is fair game, but no horror. I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to you so that way you can get us started with your number 5.
Right. Thank you. My number 5 is a movie that continues to grow on me the more that I watch it, and the deeper my appreciation gets for it every single time. If there was one movie that I think when you looked up cinema in the dictionary, it would show a screenshot from, it would be this one, and that is 1968's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, I am not particularly a big Kubrick fan. I've only seen a select few of his works, and all of his other works, I'd say, are pretty good, something to respect, but not really my thing. But for whatever reason, whatever Kubrick brought to the table, 2001 has just been one of those movies that really stands out to me as just a classic that I absolutely love. It really is just an experience. It's not really something that I feel like, I watch for like entertainment per se, which normally is a big thing with me for movies. But with this movie, I mean, the set pieces are incredible. It's just this sweeping epic, a really masterful cinematic achievement. If you ever watch any sort of behind the scenes about how Kubrick filmed a lot of these space scenes, it really is just mind blowing that this happened in the 60s. And of course, that inspired all the rumors and conspiracy theories of how Kubrick was able to fake the moon landing with this sort of technology and filmmaking techniques. But it's definitely something that I've always wanted to see on the big screen. Unfortunately, I have not been able to see on the big screen. I will say that the 4K that Warner Brothers put out for it is incredible, and hearing that very iconic score through some Dolby Atmos channels, it'll just change your life. It really is just this sweeping tale about humanity from beginning to end, answers all these big questions about life, where we came from, where we're going. It's all things that Kubrick was trying to get across. At the very least, I think it's something that everyone should be able to respect and appreciate. It's not going to be everyone's thing. I mean, the first like 5 minutes is literally just a black screen with the score playing just to set the scene. There's only like something like 10 or 20 minutes of dialogue in like the movie that's over 2 hours. But like I said, it's really just about the experience and the visuals. And I honestly think there's never been a film quite like this since in terms of like what they were able to do with the time period that they had. And also, it's a novel by sci-fi writer Arthur C. Clarke. It actually was written in parallel with the movie, so it wasn't one of these cases where the novel came out and then the movie came out. It was written as Stanley Kubrick was developing the movie. And then there's like sequel books that continue the mythology, and I think that it's one of my favorite sci-fi novel series of all time. But just as a film, just something that is just perfect as it is, incredible for the time, blows my mind away every time I see it with just what they were able to accomplish. Because it honestly looks like stuff I don't think they'd either not be able to do that today or they would just CGI it to hell today. So, my number 5, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
All right. So we're starting off the video with a little bit of controversy, and I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say that you're probably going to hate me when we get ready to have another discussion later.
Oh no.
I'm gonna table the discussion on my end for this pick because of what I know we have planned for later, but I respect you for putting it at number 5.
Right.
Um, so on my end, before I say number 5, I would just like to say that I personally put an honorable mention. I think that my number 6 probably should be number 5, but once I explain my justification for why number 5 had to be on the list, you'll probably understand why I had to push number 6 down, but it still deserves an honorable mention. So my honorable mention is 1987's Princess Bride. It has an 8 out of 10 on IMDb, and I think that I feel like there may be a little bit of a difference in how we picked our list, which is completely okay. I'm going to explain my rationale for a second. I wanted to try and pick movies that are classics because of what their impact was on, I don't want to necessarily say society, but just the general impact that they had from the movie. And with Princess Bride, whether you like the movie or you don't like the movie, pretty much everybody knows what the movie is. People will understand references from the movie. I have a friend who literally won't date somebody if they don't like the movie, and that's not like a one-off thing. It's very common. I mean, I've been on dating apps where people will use Princess Bride in their bio as like a defining factor for dates and whatnot. So just for its impact alone, and also I really enjoy the movie. I can quote the majority of the movie. I think it's great, but I had to put it number 6 as like my honorable mention. Before I go on to number 5, did you have anything you wanted to say on Princess Bride?
Yeah, I think we're just breaking each other's hearts with our first picks here. I mean, I know that was your honorable mention, but I am not a fan of that movie. I will say I've only watched it once in my life, and the context doesn't exactly help. So I used to be a fencer, and that movie is very big in the fencing community because the sword play they actually had like real professional like Olympic level fencers train the actors for the sword fighting scenes.
Hmm.
And so, in the fencing community, it's like a very popular movie. And, a bunch of my fencing buddies at the time, I think I was like 15, 16, were just like, you haven't seen that movie yet? You got to check it out. It's like every fencer needs to see that because it's like real fencing techniques, and whatnot. So I decided to check it out. And I mean, I'm not going to say, oh, it sucks or, oh, I hate it, whatever. But I'll just be completely honest. I mean, I watched it and I was just kind of straight faced the whole time. I didn't think it was particularly funny. Nothing really stirred anything in me. Like, I'm not gonna dog on it. I'm not gonna rag on it. I really respect how people like such as yourself really like appreciate it. I can see how people get value out of it, but I'll be honest, I don't know. I don't know if I was just too old when I saw it because like I said, I was like 15, 16. Maybe I had to be a little younger at first. I just feel like I didn't appreciate it like other people did. So unfortunately, I have to break your heart there, but I think I have some heartbreak coming too, as you alluded to.
It's okay. That's completely fair. It's definitely one of those movies where I can understand how some people like it, some people wouldn't. I don't think it's universal. The one thing I would say is, just from my own personal experience, if you said that the only time you've watched it was when you were 15, I would at least recommend a rewatch. There are some movies that I hated when I was in high school that I have rewatched again a lot from our discussions, ironically, that I have now enjoyed later. So, I would just recommend a rewatch. If you still don't like it, no biggie, but I do think it's worth it if you are in on a rainy Sunday.
Definitely
Um,
try and check it out, but I just didn't think it was my kind of humor, to be honest. But I'll definitely try and check it out a second time.
that's fair. So my number 5 is 1979's The Warriors. It has a 7.5 out of 10 on IMDb. And when you discuss the kings of cult classics, The Warriors is always on that list. It absolutely bombed when it first came out. But over the course of almost 50 years, it has just become this complete sensation. It has been referenced in movies, songs, books, TV shows. It was so popular that they made a video game in 2005. Most recently, in John Wick Chapter 4, they literally craft a section of the narrative of the story to just be a complete copy of the Warriors, but it takes place in Paris. That and of course with John Wick, but the impact that the Warriors has had is, in my opinion, slightly, or I'm sorry, because it's the king of the cult classic and because of the way we're doing the list, that's why I put it above Princess Bride. I love this movie. I've watched it a million times. It's one of my dad's favorites. He's the one who first showed it to me when I was younger. And there's a million famous lines that people love. I know you're a fan of How I Met Your Mother. Can You Dig It came from this. People still use that. The Warriors come out to play. Like I just with once again, like I said, I tried to rank these. There's a lot of classics I love, and so I tried to rank these based on the impact they had or they have, I should say, on like the general society itself. And so because of how much this influenced later things, I put the Warriors at number 5.
I've actually never seen this movie,
Mm.
and it is one that has always been sort of on the back burner in my mind as like something I know I need to check out because um you might have I think you might have even actually mentioned it to me before, but I know like a lot of YouTubers that I watch really recommend this movie. It's one of those, like you said, cult classics that became super popular down the road, and I know it has been parodied and referenced ever since. So it's something I definitely need to check out. And I think I would like it, but I would just have to do that for sure.
Yeah, and as just to say ahead of time for you and the people listening, it was made in 1979. So expect 70s action. But if you go in being completely okay with that, you're gonna love it. Like I know I say that because I know nowadays a lot of people have been spoiled by like John Wick and Extraction and movies of the like, and so they expect that kind of action. So I just wanted to temper some expectations. Remember, it's 1979. But if you're okay with that, it's action packed, quote unquote, for the 70s from start to finish. The if you're curious, it's a gang in New York who is blamed for the murder of a guy. I won't spoil, and they have to bop their way back to Coney, which is another thing that people reference. And on their way, they fight like every other gang in New York. So it's just it's you never know who you can trust. People are getting killed left and right. It's great.
Yeah, no, I definitely need to check it out. But I want to ask you a quick question. I have heard the Warriors be in the conversation for movies that could benefit from a modern day remake. What would be your quick thoughts on that as someone who loves the movie?
So two things. Well, actually, I guess yes and no. Yes, because it's from 1979. I'm sure it could benefit from updated action sequences and making it more, not that it's not gritty, but just I feel like with a lot of stuff today, things can pass more, if that makes sense. And so I'm sure that that could be a big benefit to it. But also, part of the thing that makes it so great is the time period it was made in. So because of the way the camera was, because of how they had to film stuff, it makes the nighttime seem darker. It adds this sort of rawness that makes you feel more in suspense with the characters. And so I also think so. I would assume, like they do with a lot of remakes, they would have a lot of the same sequences. They'd have to say a lot of the famous lines. Another thing that's used from this is whenever you see a woman's lips over a microphone, like you're speaking over the radio or whatnot, that comes from this movie. So they'd have to do that. They'd still do the same narrative style. And so I feel like a lot of audiences, especially if they've seen the original, would feel like it's just a carbon copy and that they may not actually appreciate it. And so like I'm gonna say yes because modern audiences would like younger people would probably like it more, and I'd love if people were in to the franchise as a whole. I say franchise, but obviously it's only one movie. Um, but also the original's just so good. I don't know. That's definitely something I'd probably be on the fence on.
Well, so what you're saying is that part of John Wick Chapter 4 was the remake.
Oh, 100%. Like I'm the when there's a 20 to 30 minute sequence where he is in Paris. He is uh going to a destination, and that person at that destination wants to keep him from getting there. So he puts out a hit on him, and a sexy lady comes over, and you just see her mouth on the radio saying, "Hey, guys and gals, there's a guy in Paris who we need to stop from getting to." Like, it's literally because that's the Warriors have to get back home to prove they're innocent. So the guy puts out the hit to try and keep. So, like, he's trying to do everything possible to keep them from getting home. So it's kind of this, it's literally the exact same. Uh, and yeah, sorry. I
We'll
promise I
call
didn't
that
spoil
a
anything for John Wick.
we'll call that a heavy influence, heavy creative influence.
Definitely.
Um,
Um,
Definitely need to check that out.
yes, highly
Okay,
recommend.
so my number 4 is a movie that I watched for the first time during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's sort of fitting in a certain way, and that is 1954's Rear Window. So, like Kubrick, like I said about Kubrick with 2001, I'm not particularly a Hitchcock fan. I've seen a lot of his greatest hits, his sort of his highlight reel, the popular ones. He's made like 40, 50 films. So I've seen the more popular ones. This one is my favorite. Um, the reason that I say, it was sort of relevant the time that I watched it in, sort of like with The Warriors, it's one of those things where if you haven't actually seen it, you've definitely seen it like referenced or parodied. But it stars Jimmy Stewart, who was a big actor at the time, and he is a photographer who breaks his legs and is wheelchair bound in his apartment in New York City. And he basically can't do anything but look out his window and sort of stalk people with his and people watch with his, cameras and telescopes and things. And he witnesses what he believes is a murder in one of the other apartments across from him. And it's entirely a bottle story. The entire film takes place just in his apartment as he's trying to figure this out. And it's written very much like a stage play. If I'm not mistaken, it might have actually been originally written as a stage play, because all the characters that are involved come to his apartment. They show up and leave, like it's a set, like it's a stage. It's not like he can go anywhere. But because of that, it has to get really creative in keeping your attention and keeping your focus. And I think it does that incredibly well. In my opinion, it's like the perfect thriller. I love bottle stories in general, and I think that this is like the best instance of one or the best example of one. I mean, the main character literally can't move anywhere, but it has this like compelling murder mystery, and there's a bunch of intrigue and a bunch of suspense, and keeps you not only entertained but on the edge of your seat and very drawn into the mystery, which is big for a movie, that's nearly 70 years old and made in the 1950s and takes place in just one room, but it gets very creative with that. Definitely keeps my attention. And watching that in quarantine, it was very appropriate, I guess I should say, for that time. But that's definitely become one of my favorite classics of all time.
So, real quick, just to follow up on some of the stuff you said, it says that Rear Window is based on the short story by Cornell Woolrich called It Had to Be Murder, and both were heavily inspired by the true story of Dr. Crippen, who in 1910 poisoned his wife, then cut up her body and told police she'd moved to Los Angeles. It was his wife's jewelry showing up that ended up being his downfall. And it looks like it says Hitchcock took inspiration from this as well as Cornell Woolrich's It Had to Be Murder.
I might actually have to check out that short story now.
It looks like it's only 13 pages, so it's probably a good read. I definitely love this movie. Um, I I'll be honest, I left this off of my list because I was curious if some people in the audience would argue that this could be considered closer to a horror movie. So I just didn't want to I didn't want to risk it, but no, I have nothing bad to say about this movie. I would also probably agree with you that this would be my favorite Hitchcock movie. Um, it's just well made. Everything about it is great. And I would say similar to The Warriors, as long as you go in understanding that it was made in 1954, you're gonna enjoy the movie.
For sure. The thing that really I think it does well is it makes you feel like you know these characters when all you're doing is like seeing them through, his camera and his telescopes. Like he's going around like, oh, that's Mrs. So and so, and she likes to garden. This is, Mr. So and so. Why is he always like that? He's like, they're using the character to provide like the narration, and it gets to the point where you really feel like you know these characters, and it feels like it has a full cast list even though you're really only focusing on this one character in this one location and a couple of his friends that come and go. So I just think that's another thing that it does really well, to make it feel fuller, even though it's very limited in a lot of ways. So they had to get very creative there.
Yeah, for sure. I know I've said this to you before, but I'll go on record again. I really enjoy movies with one set or with like one area or small or as little amount of areas as possible that the scenes take place in, and as small of a cast as possible, because I think it really forces the creativity and the art to come out. The director has to be on his game. The writer has to, like, the writer can't put in filler. Or at least he shouldn't, or he or she shouldn't, like, try to it has to be a good story, otherwise no one's going to watch it. The actors get to show off their range really well. So I really enjoy those types of stories where it's as contained is probably the best word as possible.
Yeah, 100%.
So my number four is Blazing 1974's Blazing Saddles. It has a 7.7 out of 10 on IMDb. And I think most people, even if you don't like his comedy, can agree that Mel Brooks is one of the kings of comedy. He's made a ton of famous movies since even the 60s. And a lot of modern comedians were inspired by him. He just is a legend in the industry. Most people would at least when I talk to people, when I watch videos, read stuff online, it seems like most people say that Young Frankenstein is their favorite, and they put Blazing Saddles second. I just disagree. Blazing Saddles to me is his best movie. I don't even think that you have to like westerns to enjoy the. You can hate. I don't like westerns. You can hate westerns and you'll still enjoy the movie. It's just that funny. And once again, you have to like Mel Brooks's style of humor, but I do. And similar with the Warriors, it has a lot of lines that are still referenced today. It's also inspired some stuff just recently. There was that animated movie, The Legend of Hank. That was just a animated telling of Blazing Saddles in feudal Japan, which I just kind of thought was random. But yeah, no. Gene Wilder's great. The it's got a really good cast, and yeah, there's not really much more I can say about it other than, in my opinion, it's Mel Brooks's favorite. Cleavon Little, there we go. I couldn't think of his name. He's the main character, and he's also great. But yeah, if you like Mel Brooks's style of humor, I think this is personally the best one you can watch. And once again, when you see it's a parody of Western movies, don't be turned away. I promise you, it's not a Western, even though it has that setting. Like you're gonna not like it because you don't like the humor, not because it's a Western.
Another one might be a common theme for your list that I've never seen. Believe it or not. I know it's one of my mom's favorite movies. She loves it. I see so many people praising it. As you said about how you don't need to like westerns, that gives me makes me feel better because I do not particularly like westerns. So hopefully this is something that I would definitely like. I know I always see it on lists of like movies that would never be made today or like movies that would get you canceled today.
Yep,
Because I've
that's Mel
seen
Brooks
some
in a
like
nutshell.
memes from it. Right. Yeah, I've seen some memes from it and I've seen some things. It definitely seems like I personally do jive with a lot of Mel Brooks's humor. I do love Young Frankenstein. I do love like Spaceballs and
Oh yeah.
what was it? The History of the World.
History of the World Part
Was
One,
that right?
Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Right. Yeah, I really do jive with his humor. So this is one that I've not seen of his, unfortunately, but I do think I would definitely like it.
Um,
So another one that I'll have to check out. This is just becoming a list of classics that I need to check out, I guess.
I can almost guarantee you my top three. I think you've at least seen two of them. But real quick for the audience, if they're curious, the story is it's a Western town that now has an African American sheriff. And so, not going to say anything else. You can probably imagine the jokes that are made.
Sure. Um, yeah, I always see that and like Tropic Thunder as like movies that they would not make today.
And Tropic Thunder, in my opinion, is also an amazingly hilarious movie.
Yes, I'm sure it'll be a podcast for a different day, but that is my favorite comedy of all time. However, moving on. Um, right. So my number three, this is my favorite Christmas movie. I watch it every Christmas. Try to make it a family event if I can. It even took over Elf as my favorite Christmas movie when I watched it for the first time. So, it's a pretty heavy hitter, but it is 1946's It's a Wonderful Life, also with Jimmy Stewart. So, sort of a common thread there. Um, it's we've been saying this for pretty much every movie that we've had on this list, but they're classics for a reason. It's one of those things where if you haven't seen it, you've definitely heard it referenced or you've definitely seen it parodied in something. So the classic story of a man, sort of the story of his life, and he ends up in a place in life that he didn't think that he'd be, and he feels like he's a failure, so he's gonna commit suicide, and then this angel comes and basically convinces him to step off the bridge, literally and figuratively, I guess, and show him what life would have been like for the people in his life had he not been born. So he gets to see these what if scenarios about where people would be at and how things would be worse because he realizes that the world does need him and he might have failed. He might have thought he failed in some aspects, but in the end, the world's a better place with him. So it's a very feel good movie, very heartfelt, definitely, and it's centered around Christmas time, the main events. That's why it's a Christmas movie. So definitely puts me in the Christmas spirit and Christmas mood. It didn't hurt that my grandfather was actually named George Bailey, which is the main character of the movie. So he always had a little pithy slogan where he'd say his name and be like, "It's a wonderful life, isn't it?" So definitely good memories in that regard about it. But just phenomenal character development. It goes surprisingly dark in places for a Christmas movie, but the upswings more than make up for it with just how good it makes you feel, how cheery it makes you feel with the Christmas spirit, make you value, your own life and what you have and your family, um, and a lot of good lessons learned. So yeah, that is my favorite Christmas movie of all time.
Yeah, another great pick. I definitely, so generally speaking, when it comes to movies made prior to the 70s, I've pretty much only seen horror movies. And so for the purposes of this list, I just didn't even look past the 70s. However, this is one I have seen. This is a great movie. It's a great pick, and I definitely, well, to me, the remainder of my list are like my favorite classics that I love, but also I could understand how some people would be like, "Oh, Jacob, how did you leave off It's a Wonderful Life?" But yeah, this is definitely the every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings.
Right, exactly, and so many shows that I can remember, like, I think even, like, I don't know, I'm thinking of, like, there's some Nickelodeon show or Disney show, like, it was, like, iCarly or something even did, like, a parody of this.
Yeah.
So it's really just out there in pop culture as, like, this concept of the "what if I've never been born?" Even the Muppets did it, they did a one with Gizmo.
Yeah, this is I feel like this and then Scrooge are the two that get remade by like everybody. Or I shouldn't say remade.
For
I
sure.
should say that they do their own versions. Um,
Right,
but yeah, this is definitely my favorite
yeah,
pick
and
of the ones in your list so far.
yeah, and, I'll go on the record, I'm not a huge fan of Christmas movies, to be honest. I mean, I love Christmas time, but I don't know. I feel like Christmas movies are very tropey and they're very like cookie cutter. And so this one is definitely like a standout as like one I genuinely like and want to watch every Christmas. Um, but yeah,
I will say that like many families, our Christmas movie is A Christmas Story. And it's funny because it's not even one of my favorite movies. It's just a family tradition. We have to watch it after we open presents on Christmas Day.
I'll just say one thing, not trying to derail the conversation. That and Home Alone are two movies that, just like The Princess Bride, I just genuinely do not understand. I have watched both of those and both Christmas Story and Home Alone, and I just do not get it. But I know so many people that just like absolutely love those movies, and like you, it's like a Christmas staple. And I know like what is it like ABC or whatever just plays a
They do it
Christmas
all
Story
day.
for like
Yeah.
24 straight hours. Yeah, and it's just a movie I just do not get. That and Home Alone. That's just my little Christmas movie rant. But
So, A Christmas Story, completely understand. A lot of people would even argue it's not a good movie. It's just been like put into American tradition. And so a lot of us, like our parents watch it growing up, so then we watch it now. But Home Alone is the interesting one because I don't think I've ever met somebody who didn't like Home Alone. That one's interesting. We don't have to go into it. We can save that for another time, but that I will say that one's the one that surprises me.
but we'll do
Uh,
Christmas movies at some point.
yeah, come back in December, listeners. So ironically, my number three is my favorite Christmas movie of all time, and I'm 100% ready for all the people in the comments to get mad at me. But number three is 1988's Die Hard. It
Makes
has
sense.
an it has an 8.2 out of 10 on IMDb. And yes, I am one of those people who says this is a Christmas movie. It takes place at Christmas. It counts. Ironically, similar to what you said, I'm not really a big Christmas person, so you can say that's part of why, or sorry, Christmas movie person. So you can say that's why I picked Die Hard, but also it's just a great movie. And sticking with the theme of my list, Die Hard revolutionized the action movie genre, so it has to be put at number three. Essentially, every movie so when you're in the 70s, you have Clint Eastwood, you have Tom Selleck. It's this like toned but like athletically skinny body that is just sexy, and that's your action star. Then we get into the 80s and it completely changes. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, and all the characters of the like are these big buff action stars. The big action movies that are selling are these ripped people that are all going to go and pick up a car. And then in 1988, you have Bruce Willis, who is John McClane, and he's just a cop. He's just an average guy. He's an average build. He relates to the average person at home. And all of a sudden, he stops this gigantic takeover of this building. And I think that's why it resonated so well with everybody at home, because it's one thing to watch Terminator and go, oh, I'm going to go to the gym because I really want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But it's another thing to watch Die Hard and go, oh, I already look like Bruce Willis. That's cool. I could do that. Obviously, it's still a movie. There are multiple instances where he should just be dead, but I think the point still stands. Like in your brain, it relates more because this is just an average guy doing it. And then you get Speed, which is Die Hard on a bus. You get Under Siege, Die Hard on a boat. Under Siege 2, Die Hard on a train. We had all of these movies after the fact. It was all, in my opinion, it's almost like the Scream effect, where Scream revolutionized the slasher genre, and then you had all these movies after it that were just trying to copy the formula. I think Die Hard does that with action. You had all these movies after that were just trying to replicate what Die Hard did. And so for that reason, I have it number three, and yes, it is an amazing Christmas movie.
I am in total agreement with you. It is definitely a Christmas movie. Everyone who says otherwise is just objectively wrong. You know, the entire movie takes place at not only at Christmas time, at a Christmas party, and all throughout there's Christmas motifs. You know, you see the Christmas trees, you get Christmas one-liners. Like it fits every single criteria. So I am in total agreement there. Um, and I think you also left off Die Hard on a Plane with Air Force One. That is
I did, yes.
definitely one of those. But yeah, no, I agree. I actually first time I watched it was actually with you in our dorm room when we watched Die Hard freshman year. I think I've watched it, I think once since, might have been twice, but once since. Still have not seen the sequels, but I've heard for some of them I'm not really missing much. But the original, yeah, like you said, it's a great 80s action movie. I think as far as 80s action movies go, it actually is quite well written. It actually has a lot of cleverness in it, like has a lot of cool callbacks in it, like things in the beginning actually come into play in the end. 'Cause, you know, a lot of these 80s movies kind of just get lost in the cheese and they get lost in just the action and everything. But this one has all that. Like it's got some 80s cheese, it's got the action, but it also is smartly written. Which a lot of those iconic ones did not have. So that's one thing to definitely respect about it. So that's a good pick. At some point I'm sure I'll watch that in the sequels, but
Real quick before you continue, I realized there's one more thing I forgot to say. Going off what you were talking about with how it actually has a well-written story, it also has who many people consider one of the greatest movie villains of all time in Hans Gruber. And this fact never ceases to amaze me. This was Alan Rickman's first film. So not only was it a first time actor, he delivers such a good performance that many people either consider him the best, maybe top five. Of course, it's up for discussion. But Hans Gruber himself also goes down in history as this amazing movie villain. So I just wanted to make sure I wanted to give him his due as well.
For sure. Definitely a great actor, and he's great in the role. So that's a good pick. Yeah, Christmas movie.
We
So
didn't plan this.
we did not. So my number two is another bottle story like Rear Window. This one I know for a fact was written as a screenplay for the stage because I had to read it in high school. And in my opinion, just like Rear Window, it's up there with perfect bottle stories. And it is 1957's 12 Angry Men. Um, Once again, goes without saying for all of these, this has also been parodied in so many things. I'm a big fan of the Family Guy episode that's based on 12 Angry Men. I think it's called like 12 and a half Angry Men or something. But it is another thing that's been parodied over and over. It's had a remake that I've not seen, but I've heard it's quite good as well. But it's this the story. So setting in the time period of the 1950s, it's black and white. It's about a jury, an all white male jury, where there is a Puerto Rican teenager on trial for murder of a white woman. Um, and they 11 out of the 12 are just convinced that he's guilty because of their own prejudices. They're like, well, he's a Puerto Rican kid, of course he did it. That's just how they are, like very not veiled racism, just overt racism. And then there's one juror number 8, who's the reasonable one, who's like, guys, maybe he's not. And he sort of challenges the other 11 that they can't just be so hasty and just go for a guilty verdict because of their own preconceived notions. And he convinces them to sort of take a step back and reevaluate it. And in the process, what's so brilliant about the screenplay and the movie is it's also about them reevaluating their entire worldviews. So like I said, it's a bottle story. There's like intro and outros that are like them walking into and out of the courthouse, but like the 99% of the movie is just them in the jury room, all interacting about this, going over the case evidence, having discussions about worldviews and race and prejudices and society and back and forth. So really, it's a battle of worldviews through the context of this case. But if you like legal dramas like I do, or like legal thrillers, like a big John Grisham fan, this is definitely for you because, um, yeah, it's just this jury hashing it out about what's right and what's wrong, both in the terms of this case, outside the terms of this case, tackles so many relevant issues that we still tackle today about prejudice and the criminal unfairness in the criminal justice system. Um, all the jurors have numbers. They're like juror number 1, juror number 2, whatever, but you feel like you get to know them as people, even though you have numbers. It does such a great job of you knowing, okay, well, juror number 4, this is his personality and this is his, this is what he is. Like it does a great job of making you feel like you know them. Um, and really get to know them well. But it's another bottle story that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Um, and yeah, that another movie that I think, if done very carefully, maybe could be a good remake to make in the present. It definitely would be a bit of a minefield with the political climate, but I think if you could do it properly, it would definitely be up for a modern day reboot.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because I've never seen the original, but I have seen the remake, and the remake is awesome, so I can only imagine that the original is just as good. Um, so yeah, I don't necessarily feel right commenting on this one because I'd be talking about the remake, but yeah, this is I agree with you. I think that the if it is called 12 and a half Angry Man, that's one of my favorite Family Guy episodes. So that just the premise in general is awesome, and if the original's anywhere even close to as good as the remake, then I can only imagine it's a great movie.
Definitely recommend checking it out.
So my number 2 is 1982's First Blood. It has a 7.7 out of 10 on IMDb. And this one is where so for the top 2, this is definitely where I started to put my own bias into it. You could make an argument that 3, 4, 5, 6 are better than what I have at 1 and 2. But for me, these are definitely two of my favorite classics. First Blood is based off of one of my favorite books. And so I have a secondary attraction to this movie. Um, and so David Morrell is one of my favorite authors. He wrote First Blood. The narrative in First Blood is about a Vietnam War vet who comes home and essentially has a war on American soil, in that he wants to reacclimate but is not allowed to because he's being tormented by a sheriff of this small town that he has wandered into. And that is the story that they take for the movie. I will say that the book goes a step further in that the sheriff is a Korean War veteran. And so they have this interesting parallel in the mindset of Korea versus the mindset of Vietnam. And they put more emphasis on the actual, like, living a war at home. For the movie, the producers who got a hold on it wanted it to sell. And so they make it a lot more 80s action, boom, boom, pow. I think there's only like 3 deaths in the movie. The book is much more violent, we'll say. And they did a good job. It did sell. And so I definitely recommend the book. I recommend the movie too. I mean, there's been 5 movies. As we'll definitely get to, the 4th movie is one of my favorite movies, and so the first one is right up there. It's still a great story, don't get me wrong. When this movie came out, it was highly influential in the debate of how we treat our soldiers, what they have to go through, what especially how we treat them when they come home. And so, still stays with my theme of impact to society, but this is definitely more of my personal bias if you may consider one of my lower ones better. But yeah, First Blood's great. Sylvester Stallone's great in the role, and you still get the general dialogue and the general philosophical quandary that you do as the book, though not on the same level.
Yeah, and this is one, once again, like Die Hard, I've seen this one a couple times, but I've never seen the sequels. This was sort of when it was like all about being like good on paper, right? Before it just kind of went off the rails with Stallone on horse steroids, you know, double double grabbing AK-47s and shooting down helicopters. But
we we don't talk about 2 and 3.
yeah, no, the first one is a great film. You are everything. I agree with everything that you said. I am actually now interested to read the book. I didn't know that about the sheriff being a Korean War veteran. That sounds like a very interesting way to sort of frame that. I feel like you kind of get some elements of that a little bit in the movie, like old guard versus new guard a bit.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, it is a solid film about some very heavy issues, and I think it's one of those films that makes people sort of remember that Stallone is actually a really good actor. I think for a while there, not necessarily, well, sort of by his own fault. He took roles that were just, kind of just dumb action movies, whatever, where he didn't really have to act. He just had to, flex and shoot. But this was one of those movies where I think you kind of watch it and you're like, wow, he actually really is a really good actor. Um, so yeah, I think this film has a lot going for it, and probably one of those movies. I mean, you have seen the sequel, so maybe you'd agree that probably shouldn't have been a franchise, but
Yeah, I would say, so the other thing to note is First Blood came first as a book, then it was adapted into the movie. Then it got sequels, and then David Morrell was paid a bunch of money to adapt the sequels into books, and they're basically just carbon copies. So I definitely don't recommend the sequels to the books. The sequels to the
right.
movies, number 2 is your absolute stereotypical 80s action flick. The story is borderline non-existent, but it at least has good action. The third one is a pile of garbage, and I don't know how it even got made. I'm totally gonna get
This
hate in
one
the
is
comments.
dedicated to the brave Mujahideen freedom fighters or whatever that did not age well.
It definitely, yeah, it's the action is just so lackluster in the third one that it doesn't even make up for how bad the story is. At least in the second one, you get to have fun with the action sequences they have. There's a literal scene where we get to watch a guy blow up from an arrow. It's just great. But You have to be into that kind of stuff. The first one at least has a good story. And once again, I will pretty much die on the hill that the fourth one is an amazing movie. I actually put it above the first one. I think the story is amazing. I think the action is great. Like you said, I think it shows that Sylvester Stallone's a good actor. I think that they managed to take the philosophical quandary of the first movie and just add layers to it. I will definitely die on the hill that the fourth movie, just titled Rambo, is just awesome.
Right, and then Rambo: Last Blood when he has a crossover with Home Alone, right?
That one doesn't exist. We don't talk about. I should have said I don't know what you're talking about. So apparently the director's cut of Last Blood is much better. I watched
I've
the
heard that as
theatrical
well.
version, so I can't 100% say it's not that good. The ending sequence is awesome, but what you have to sift through to get to that ending, to me, is not worth it. Is the best way I can put that review.
It was the first, to my knowledge, usage of Old Town Road in a movie trailer, which we had joked about before that trailer dropped.
And it is an action version of Old Town Road. So you
Right.
like it, at least to me, I got goosebumps because it was like, oh, because I don't like the song, but the action like version where it's like, oh, okay, wait, oh, ooh, these are nice beats. All this, like, I felt a kind of way.
Right. Yeah. Another thing like Die Hard, I'm sure I'll check out the sequels at some point. I think I actually do have a Blu-ray set of this that I had gotten at like Walmart for super cheap or something. So I'm sure I'll check that out. But First Blood is a great pick for that. I am a little bit surprised that you put that above Die Hard, to be honest.
This is definite. That's why I started to put bias because I think as a whole, the franchise of Die Hard is much better than First Blood. But this is definitely where I love the book, I love the movie, and my love of the book is putting the movie above Die Hard. Is the best way that this is where bias comes in.
Sense. That makes sense. Okay, so number one, the coup de grace on my list. My favorite classic that I love, and actually one of my favorite movies overall. Historically, this actually was my favorite movie. Depending on which day of the week you ask me nowadays, it still is my favorite movie. And that is returning to 1968 with the original Planet of the Apes.
I knew it.
Um, Exactly. Anyone who actually knows me knows that this is like my favorite movie. It's one of my favorite movie franchises of all time. This movie is just I remember watching it for the first time and just being totally blown away and completely immersed in this world. The set pieces are incredible. The location shots that they got in the American Southwest, just the way that they filmed that, all the makeup. It got Oscar nominations for best costume design. Got Oscar nominations for best score because an incredible score that I even listen to this day. Just such an interesting mythology, interesting lore with this, futuristic ape society and how they are structured and what happened. The cat's out of the bag with this spoiler. Everyone knows it's planet Earth and the Statue of Liberty, but just like, that twist being probably, on objectively one of the best movie twists of all time, and subjectively one of my favorite movie twists of all time. Um, just the way that that's pulled off in the film still gives me goosebumps to this day. Like that existential terror, sinking in of, this is Earth and this is the future. Um, but beyond that, I think one of the things that's really underrated about the movie when you watch it is it gets into some pretty deep themes and some that are very like personally interesting to me about like, science versus religion, truth versus narrative. A lot of those issues that are still relevant to this day. You have Zaius, who's the main antagonist, the orangutan, who he has dual roles as minister of science and chief defender of the faith. And their ape religion says that apes have always been on top and humans have always been subservient. And then you find out that there's this forbidden zone that contains proof that humans actually used to be on top. And you find out that Zaius knew about it and that he suppressed it for the sake of ape religion. And so it gets into these really deep topics about that, about, what's true versus what's told, what you believe versus what you can see, things like that. Some really deep issues there. And of course, it talks about the nature of mankind, what makes man man. And I think it really points the mirror at people when the movie sort of talks about how these apes have basically supplanted mankind and took on mankind's, attributes, but they're not the good attributes. They still have, racism amongst their own kind. They still have, militarism and violence and unrest in that sense, and fundamentalism and all these destructive things. And it sort of like points the mirror at us, like these apes became humans and they didn't become these better enlightened people like they thought they were. They became just like us. So what does that mean for us? So I think it's a really deep film, a sci-fi classic. Like I said, I love the lore and I love the universe, and that's why I love all the sequels. I love even, maybe whenever we get into hot takes or anything, I love the 2001 reboot from Tim Burton. I think that's very underrated. And of course, this new reboot prequel trilogy um, with Rise, Dawn, Warfare, Planet of the Apes are genuinely some of the best movies, I think, of the past decade or two. So yeah, that is probably no surprise. Like you said, you definitely called it. But Planet of the Apes has always been one of my favorite movies of all time. And it is my favorite classic that I love.
Yeah, this is a little fun fact for you and the listeners. Nowadays, I binge movies all the time, but the original 5 Planet of the Apes movies was the first film series I ever binged. It was like middle school, I want to say 7th or 8th grade. They were doing a run on like a Saturday, and I started with the 1968 and ended with Battle for the Planet of the Apes in 1973. And this was the first film series I ever binged. I absolutely loved them. They didn't necessarily hit me like it did you. I haven't rewatched them in ages, so maybe I should, and then I'll have the same experience. But I loved them when I watched them. But yeah, these are definitely great. I agree with you about the reboot series. I haven't watched the 2001 remake in ages, so I don't want to comment on that one. Um, but yeah, this I totally should have had you say, "Hey, guess what my number one is," because then I could have gotten some brownie points.
For sure. And it's just one of those things where nostalgia definitely comes into play. Because I remember I had never seen the sequels, but Costco used to sell physical media. They used to sell like Blu-rays and DVDs. They don't anymore. And sometime around, I think it was like 2012 or 2013, they were closing out their physical media. And our local Costco, I'm sure other Costco's were doing this, but like our local Costco was doing like a everything must go sale for their physical media because they were clearing it out as like a company wide thing. And so the box set of the original 5 on Blu-ray, it was like 10 or 12 bucks with whatever thing that they were doing marked down. And
Mhm.
that's when I got them and I watched them all the way through. It was like one weekend and I was like in like 8th grade and just like I'd always loved the first one, but that was when watching all 5 of them for the first time all together, and definitely a very nostalgic experience that contributes, but, I still have that box set to this day, and I'm waiting for it to come on 4K one of these days.
That they'll yeah, they'll do it. They got to do it eventually. But yeah, that's a very solid pick. Um, just for fun, do you want to try and guess what my number one is?
I'm honestly surprised that Die Hard was not number 1. That's why I had said that I thought that's why I was surprised you put First Blood above Die Hard because I meant, like, for you personally.
You
So,
really
I'm
just think that I'm Jake from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, don't you? No, I'm kidding.
yes, every day.
Um, well, my number one, my favorite classic of all time, uh, is 1984's Beverly Hills Cop. 7.3 out of 10 on IMDb. This is another one that I will definitely die on some hills. I've rewatched this movie a million times just to set the stage. So Eddie Murphy was a comedian on SNL, and of course he had some fame, but then he went into acting. He did 48 Hours in 1982, Trading Places in 1983, and then Beverly Hills Cop in 1984. 48 Hours is good, Trading Places is good, but Beverly Hills Cop was definitely the one that like solidified him as the actor we now know and love. It was a massive success. This isn't like The Warriors where it bombed. This spawned an amazing sequel, and then a third movie that I personally think gets a little more hate than it's deserved. It's not good. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not good. But a lot of people put the third Beverly Hills Cop movie as one of those movies that's like the worst thing ever made. And fun fact, they finally greenlit a fourth movie where he's going to be like the old grizzled veteran who's training Joseph Gordon-Levitt as like his replacement. So love Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I'm really excited for that fourth movie. Glad it's finally getting made. But back to the original. This one is totally, I'm not even like I was talking about like impact on society and like how it's been referenced, and this definitely does that, but I not if I'm being objective, not as much as the other movies. This is pure bias. I love this movie. It's funny. I think it has amazing rewatchability. It definitely comments on stuff, but it's designed just to be a fun action comedy that you watch on the weekend with your family. Maybe you watch it with your friends. You do it for a date. You do it with your baby. I don't know. You can watch it in any instance, and it's just a great movie. I definitely, this is the,
Weddings, funerals, birthdays, Christmas.
when I die, this needs to play at my funeral.
I'll keep that
um,
in mind in case I beat you there.
but yeah, this is totally I don't even know if I've sold it, but this is my complete biased answer in that Beverly Hills Cop is just a great movie. Axel Foley is legendary. He's an amazing character, and don't get me wrong, the story is not bad. This isn't like your stereotypical 80s action movie. Like, it has a good story. It's a crime drama that has action and comedy. And so there's a murder. He's investigating the murder. If you're curious, he's a cop in Chicago who has to go to Beverly Hills to figure out why his best friend was murdered. And so while he's in Beverly Hills, he just kind of messes around with the Beverly Hills police, with the Beverly Hills people. It's a commentary on like how Beverly Hills people act, how he acts from Chicago, the differences, the different types of police forces. Like, there is commentary if you really want there to be, but also it's just a fun movie. And fun fact, his Mumford sweatshirt that he wears was one of like the best selling uh 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 like I'm drawing merch one
Apparel,
yeah,
merch,
like
yeah.
apparel merchandise. Uh at the time, the Mumford sweatshirt like set records for how much it sold. And you can still get them today, but they don't reprint them like you'd get them from like a third party website who just put Mumford on a sweatshirt, so it's not as cool. If you want an original, they're a shit ton of money on eBay. So don't, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're a diehard fan. But yeah, just I don't know. This movie is just great. I don't know if I sold it, but it's
Definitely
just a good
sold it.
movie.
I have not seen it. You have definitely sold it though. Um, I know that fourth one's been in development hell for a long time, and I did see that it was finally moving forward. So I'm glad to see that you're excited for it. But
Yep,
yeah,
that
I
and
can't say
Rush
I'm a
Hour 4.
right. I can't say I'm a big Eddie Murphy fan only because I haven't seen things that he's in. So I can't say for sure that I'm a big fan of his, but in things that I have seen him in, I've liked. But yeah, definitely one that I would have to check out in that sense. I like 80s action comedies in general, and so it feels like could be something that'd be right up that alley. So
Do you remember when we were young and there was that Crazy Frog song that was called Axel Foley that was like do 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 do.
yeah,
That is
too
from
well.
this
Thank you for
movie.
reminding me. Okay, that makes
The
sense.
theme song of Beverly Hills Cop is the 80ized, we'll say, version of that song. Of course, they make their own version later, like the original is Beverly Hills Cop, but it was my ringtone on my phone for like 3 years. It's great.
Definitely, we'll check that out. It looks like I got some on my list to check out.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having this discussion with me. Did you have any closing thoughts?
Um, just I have plenty. It seems like I got plenty to catch up on, and this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for coming.